The air inside the ballroom was heavy with perfume and the quiet hum of expensive conversation. Chandeliers glittered above, painting gold across tailored tuxedos and designer gowns. Barron Trump had been to countless events like this, ballrooms full of important people saying unimportant things. But this night felt different, because she was here, Nicole Kidman. He saw her across the room before anyone else did, not just as a movie star, but as a symbol of a kind of mystery he never quite understood. Her strawberry blonde hair fell in soft waves over a shimmering ivory gown, and she held a glass of champagne as if she were merely a guest in someone else's dream. She looked peaceful, but her eyes held something deeper, something questioning. For a moment, Barron hesitated. Then he began to walk toward her. She noticed him halfway across the room. Their eyes met, briefly, curiously, and then graciously, she offered a smile. "Ms. Kidman," Barron began, steady but honest in tone, "I know this might sound a little cliché, but I just want to say, I've admired you for a long time. Not just your work, but the honesty you carry in it," he explained. Nicole's smile softened. "Cliché doesn't mean it's not true," she replied kindly, her voice touched with that unmistakable Australian warmth. Barron let out a small breath and nodded. "I guess I always wondered how someone so surrounded by art, performance, and illusion still holds on to a sense of what's real." He continued thoughtfully. Nicole tilted her head slightly, as though considering not just his words, but the reason behind them. "Maybe," she said slowly, "because I spend so much time pretending, I've grown obsessed with what isn't pretend." She answered with quiet gravity. Barron looked down for a moment. He understood that feeling more than he could explain. Nicole leaned in just slightly. "Tell me something," she asked gently. "Do you believe in God, Barron?" she inquired. The question didn't feel casual. It struck him like a sudden change in key. "I think I want to, but sometimes it feels like believing in God means accepting a kind of silence from him that's hard to live with," he admitted. Nicole didn't look surprised. In fact, her expression turned almost somber. "Then let me ask it differently," she said, lowering her glass. "If God exists, why do you think he gives us lives so full of contradictions? Why place us in a world where good and evil are so tangled we can't always tell them apart?" she asked, with sincerity sharp enough to cut through the music still playing behind them. Barron didn't speak. Not yet. For the first time that night, he didn't have an answer. And maybe that silence was the beginning of one. The question still echoed inside him long after Nicole stopped speaking. If God exists, why place us in a world where good and evil are so tangled we can't always tell them apart? It wasn't just a philosophical puzzle. It was something more personal, something ancient. Barron stood beside her, but for a moment he wasn't in that glittering ballroom anymore. His mind had drifted to memories he rarely allowed himself to revisit. He remembered being 14, a silent room, a television screen playing endless news cycles with his family's name on repeat, a father everyone had an opinion about, a mother who vanished from the public eye just to survive it all. And him, alone, young, watching the world try to define what his name meant before he had a chance to define it for himself. Barron closed his eyes for a moment. "I used to think," he said slowly, "that God was a kind of reward system. Be good, get good. Be bad, face consequences, like the rules in a game," he confessed. Nicole remained still, listening. Not just hearing, but truly listening. "But then I realized," he continued, "life doesn't work like that. Some of the kindest people I know have suffered deeply, and some of the most selfish ones seem to move through life untouched," he reflected, his voice firm but low. Nicole nodded slightly, not interrupting. Barron went on. "There were times I prayed, not for anything specific, just for a sign, something to tell me I wasn't alone in trying to make sense of everything." He admitted, his eyes focused on the carpet beneath their feet, as if the pattern might contain some hidden meaning. "And did you ever get that sign?" Nicole asked gently, her voice softer now. Barron looked up, meeting her eyes. "Number, not the kind I was hoping for," he answered with quiet finality. "But maybe that's the point," he added after a beat. "Maybe God doesn't answer the way we want because he's not trying to fix the world for us. Maybe he wants us to see the world first, in all its confusion, in all its tragedy. Maybe the knowing that it's broken is part of becoming whole, he explained with a kind of clarity that startled even himself. Nicole watched him closely. Her face had shifted, not in shock, but in a kind of quiet awe. That's not the answer I expected, she said. Barron smiled faintly. It's not the one I expected to give, he replied. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel the need to defend what he said. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was sacred. They moved toward the edge of the ballroom, where the light dimmed and the music felt more distant. Neither of them spoke for a while, but it wasn't the kind of silence that asked for escape. It was the kind that asked for presence. Barron leaned against a marble pillar, folding his hands in front of him. Nicole stood just beside him, no longer just a Hollywood icon to him, but a woman unafraid to wonder aloud. I've spent years trying to understand why things happen the way they do, Nicole said quietly, her eyes scanning the distant chandeliers. I've seen people lose everything they love, people who deserve better. And I've also seen moments of beauty in places that had no right to be beautiful. So I asked that question, not to argue with God, but to understand how we're supposed to live in a world he lets remain so complicated, she continued, her voice laced with an ache that didn't ask for pity. Barron turned toward her, the weight of her words settling in him. I think the mistake we make is believing life is meant to make sense, he said. Maybe we're not here to solve the chaos. Maybe we're here to walk through it without letting it turn us cruel or bitter or afraid, he added, his voice carrying the steadiness of someone who had walked that path. Nicole slowly nodded, her expression unreadable, somewhere between sadness and hope. And what about faith? She asked. Barron paused, then replied, I think faith is continuing to love when the world teaches you to shut down. It's forgiving when revenge feels cleaner. It's showing up, fully as yourself, when it's easier to disappear into noise. He explained, his eyes steady. A small smile formed on Nicole's lips. You speak like someone who's already wrestled with the worst parts of life, she remarked gently. Barron looked down and gave a soft laugh, not of amusement, but recognition. I grew up being told who I was before I knew it myself. That forces you to start asking deeper questions early, he admitted. Nicole reached out and lightly touched his arm, a gesture not of flirtation, but of shared humanity. Well, she said softly, whatever questions you still have, I hope you never stop asking them. Because the way you look for truth, it matters, she offered sincerely. Barron held her gaze, and in that moment, it didn't matter that they came from different worlds, different generations, or different beliefs. What mattered was that they both cared enough to ask the hard questions. And even more, that they weren't afraid to sit in the silence where answers might never come. As Barron Trump walked out of the gala that night, the cool air brushing against his face felt sharper than before. Not because of the temperature, but because he was no longer the same person who had walked in hours earlier. Nicole Kidman's question, so deceptively simple, so painfully honest, had pierced through the polished layers he had spent years perfecting. It wasn't just a question about God, it was a question about meaning, suffering, purpose, and identity. A question that demanded not an answer, but a reckoning. That night, Barron didn't rush to respond with theories or quotes. He didn't try to prove his intellect or shield himself with elegant words. Instead, he let himself feel the discomfort, the uncertainty, the human ache of not knowing. And in doing so, something inside him shifted. He had always been taught to lead, to defend, to stand tall in the face of scrutiny. But no one had prepared him for the quiet humility of being asked a question he couldn't answer with certainty. That was the turning point. For the first time, he realized that maybe true strength wasn't about always knowing what to say, but having the courage to listen, to pause, and to keep searching even when clarity refused to come. Long after the gala lights dimmed and the music faded, that question stayed with him. It echoed in the quiet moments, in the solitude of early mornings, in the unexpected stillness between public duties. And while he couldn't fully answer Nicole's question that night, what mattered more was that he didn't turn away from it. In a world that rewards noise, Barron chose silence. In a culture that demands certainty, He embraced complexity. And in a life that could have been all performance, he began, slowly, deliberately, to live with intention. And so it wasn't the elegance of the evening or the fame in the room that defined that night. It was a moment of unguarded truth between two people, one seeking, the other asking. And a question that, in refusing to be answered, quietly changed everything. Let's keep the conversation going. Subscribe, share, and drop your thoughts below. Your perspective is valuable and might inspire others.